It's finally here. Fans of author and filmmaker Neil Gaiman, or Gaiman depending, I guess, are foaming at the mouth over the series debut of American Gods. Hi, I'm Mighty Mr. Mustache, the mightiest mustache in the universe, and I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman's work, and I have been ever since he started. So I was really excited to hear this was coming, and I thought it was very important to do a review, episode by episode, which I promise will contain no spoilers. So television is at what some people might call the perfect place for a show like this to exist. Its gritty realism and hyper-stylized fantasy are perfectly acceptable in the modern TV age, and there's an alphabet soup of independent networks who have no requirement to answer to some 1960s era model of television imagery. Let's get into exactly what you can expect. Now, the first episode hits you hard and hits you fast with a baseball bat made out of raw graphic violence and some pretty steamy graphic sex. There's no doubt about the direction this series is planning on taking. Neil Gaiman must have a fetish for beating on his protagonists because he just piles the heartbreak and torture on right from the word go. The fallout from hit successes like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad can be felt all over this series, and there's a healthy dose of that Frank Miller stylized action scenes. You're going to have flashbacks from 300 and Sucker Punch, but it does lack the more ridiculous aspects of those. The thing American Gods gets right immediately is knowing when to turn off that slow motion crazy action trip and just let the actors dominate the scene with some good acting. That I found was lacking in some of the other offerings, like, again, Sin City and things like that. Now, I mentioned the lead and how Neil Gaiman loves to dump on them. The lead in this is a man named Shadow Moon, and he's the sort of anti hero. And at his core, he really is a classic anti hero. But it's a big mark in favor of the writing that it doesn't just hang over you like some dark, edgy trope. And for the majority of this first dip into the TV pool, he comes off as just a quiet, tough guy getting literally crapped on by the universe and doing his best to cope. He's played with some pretty good style by British-born actor Ricky Whittle, and I don't really know much of what else Ricky's done. I looked it up, and it seems to be teen drama from the UK. I give him some serious props for not disappearing behind the acting of people like Ian McShane and Peter Stormare, although it's not too hard to play the character like Shadow Moon when you look like Ricky Whittle. I mean, you stand there and look smoldering, that's pretty much your job done. It is, however, really easy to vanish behind the better acting of some of the really top-notch talent that is lined up. So I do give him credit for doing a good job. He's having fun with it and he's running with it. He is first and foremost believable, and that's very important as this is a story about unbelievable things and you need something to anchor you. And Ricky Whittle has an almost undefinable ethnicity about him that really plays strongly to the character. I mean, if you look at him, he's obviously, African background, but there's also maybe some Indian in there or some Middle Eastern, and that makes him undefinable. And it's very important because the character of Shadow Moon is a black character, an African American character, but he isn't living the African American experience in this story. So I'm going to start down a path here that might be a little controversial, but listen to the end before you go SJW on me. I mean this in the nicest way possible, and I mean this in a purely analytical way. In both the book and the series, the character of Shadow Moon, who it's focused on, is an African American man, a black man. The actor playing him is well chosen, and there isn't a way to say this that doesn't sound off in some way, but he's not a black character. He never was, not even in the book. Rather, he's a character who happens to have brown skin. Nothing about the character of Shadow comes off as typically or even stereotypically African American. He's not, inner city. He's not from that kind of bad background. In fact, they don't even really touch on his background all that much. He's not African American in his culture or his dialogue or his attitude. And most importantly, the entire remaining cast never color their interactions with him. His skin tone is a fact, but any question of race or race interaction in this version of supernatural America are literally never addressed. Whether that's good or bad is going to be up to you, the viewer, to decide for yourself. And it's the only time I'm bringing this up in any of the reviews I do on these episodes. I'm only bringing it up because it's very unique as a concept. Whether he meant it or not, Neil Gaiman has created a racially representative character while at the same time completely leaving out racial tension in favor of telling a much more interesting, or the much more interesting and unique story that is American Gods. It has the benefit of not giving this story an identity crisis, or giving the series an identity crisis, and keeps the focus on this supernatural fish out of water narrative that Neil Gaiman is a master of telling. As for the cast, in this first episode, you really only get to know 3 of the recurring characters in the series. Others do get introduced, but you don't get enough time for them to stick in your mind or to give you a good look at their potential. The first outing focuses on, of course, Shadow, Shadow Moon, the main character, who is not ready for any development or backstory yet, since the story throws you and him in at the deep end and leaves you both struggling to get to the surface and take a good look. The real introduction is left to Mr. Wednesday, played and portrayed perfectly, in my opinion, by Ian McShane. McShane is this gorgeous mix of Al Pacino, Johnny Cash, and Christopher Walken, and I can't think of a modern actor who could take this role and do it justice quite like Ian McShane does. Maybe Gabriel Byrne, but that's a big maybe, and I think it would have been too much a role that we identified with that actor than a role that we identify with the character. I'm tingling with excitement to see the remaining cast of recurring characters make their appearance and hope that they're just as good. The last character we get to meet, at least properly, is Mad Sweeney, the nearly 7-foot tall drunken Irish leprechaun. Yes, that's a thing, and it's as awesome as it sounds. And he looks and feels like he jumped off the pages of the book. Pablo Schreiber of Orange is the New Black fame just hammers this role for every ounce of fun he can squeeze from it. He's just having a great time playing this character. For any nit that I might pick with the style or feel of the production, and that there are sometimes, I can always come back to casting for a solid win. As for the style and feel, yes, it is very stylized in some of its things, and that can take some getting used to. I'll talk more about that later. What could we ask for from upcoming episodes that could make this series better, even though it did get, as far as I'm concerned, a very solid beginning? Well, as little as I like them in most TV shows, the flashback moments that you're going to see are very important as expositional moments that give you some connection and attachment to the characters. Mad Sweeney, for one, has this remarkable story behind his presence in America, and I'm hoping that the trend of telling these stories continues because it will bring some depth to characters who otherwise would be a little too one-dimensional. So the too long didn't read version of this review is that American Gods is a stylized, no censorship, no holds barred series that is set to do justice to one of Neil Gaiman's most intense and adult pieces of supernatural fiction. It's dark, it's story focused, with action and intensity that never stops battering your senses. Now, the stylization is a bit shocking at first, especially for an audience who might be expecting this smelly and gritty realism of like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad, but I do find that it grows on you and they don't overuse it. And in keeping with the theme of gods, I would suggest having some faith that this is a story that will be worth watching. If I have to give it a rating, it gets 10 on 10 for staying faithful to the source material, and an 8.5 on 10 for execution, and a 10 on 10 for casting. I think this is brilliant, and I can't wait to see more of it. I want to thank you for taking the time to enjoy this little review. Follow along with the series. I'll be doing a review of every episode, and feel free to comment in the comments. Let me know what you think, even if you disagree with me. If you're polite, I'll even respond. As always, subscribe so you don't miss any. And if you liked it, slap a like. If you didn't like, let me know what you didn't like, and hopefully I can make it better. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.